I never thought I'd be the guy typing out his life story on the internet, but here I am. Honestly, I don't know where else to turn. My wife, Allison, just got back from a business trip, and let's just say her grand return wasn't anything like I'd imagined. Let me set the scene for you. She walked through the door late last night, her suitcase rolling behind her, her face lit up with laughter. She was laughing so hard she had tears in her eyes. At first, I thought maybe she'd had a good time with her colleagues, maybe some inside joke that had her cracking up. But there was something off about it. Her laugh wasn't the carefree kind I was used to hearing. It had an edge to it, almost like she was trying too hard. "Babe, what's so funny?" I asked, forcing a smile as I walked over to greet her. "Oh, nothing," she said, still giggling, waving me off like it was no big deal. "Just something silly that happened during the trip. You wouldn't get it. I wouldn't get it. That stung more than it should have. We used to share everything, jokes, stories, even the mundane details of our day. But lately, things had been different. She'd been distant, distracted, always glued to her phone or busy with work. And now, she was laughing about something I wouldn't get. My gut was already telling me something was wrong, but I tried to push it aside. She dropped her suitcase by the door and headed straight to the kitchen, still chuckling under her breath. I followed her, trying to make conversation. "How was the trip?" I asked. "It was fine," she said, opening the fridge and grabbing a bottle of wine. She poured herself a generous glass, then leaned against the counter, swirling it around like she was in some kind of fancy wine commercial. "Just fine," I pressed, hoping she'd give me something more. "Yeah, just fine," she said, taking a sip. "Work stuff, you know how it is." Except I didn't. I've been working from home for the past 2 years, ever since my company downsized. My work stuff these days involves Zoom meetings and trying to keep up with deadlines while managing the house. Allison, on the other hand, has been climbing the corporate ladder like her life depends on it. Business trips, late nights, networking events. It's like she's in a completely different world from me. As she sipped her wine, I noticed her phone on the counter. It lit up with a notification, and for a split second, I caught a glimpse of a name I didn't recognize. Jason. "Who's Jason?" I asked before I could stop myself. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide for a fraction of a second before she quickly composed herself. "What? Oh, he's just someone from work. We were on the same team for the project." "What?" "No reason," I said, trying to sound casual, but my heart was pounding. Something about her reaction didn't sit right with me. She finished her wine and yawned dramatically. "I'm exhausted. I think I'm going to head to bed." I watched her walk away, my mind racing. Normally, I would have let it go, but this time I couldn't. Something inside me had snapped. I waited until I heard her footsteps fade upstairs, then grabbed her phone off the counter. "Now, before you judge me, let me just say this. I didn't want to snoop. I've always believed in trust and respect in a relationship. But something about her laugh, her evasiveness, the way she said, 'You wouldn't get it,' it was eating me alive." I unlocked her phone. Yes, I knew her passcode, and started scrolling through her messages. Most of it was boring work stuff, but then I found a thread with Jason. My heart sank as I read through their conversation. It wasn't explicit, but it was intimate. Inside jokes, late-night chats, emojis that made my stomach churn. And then there was the kicker. Last night was unforgettable. I can't stop thinking about it. That was from him. And her response, "Me too. Can't wait for the next trip." I felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. My hands were shaking, my vision blurred. I wanted to march upstairs and confront her right then and there, but something stopped me. Instead, I put her phone back on the counter and sat down at the kitchen table, my mind racing. Who was this Jason? What had they done? And why was she laughing when she walked through the door? I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I stayed up going over every interaction we'd had in the past few months, trying to piece together the puzzle. By morning, I made up my mind. I wasn't going to let this slide. But first, I needed proof. I didn't confront Allison the next morning. Instead, I played my role, the supportive husband who believed his wife's every word. It wasn't easy. Every time I looked at her, all I could see were those messages with Jason, my mind filled with images of what might have happened on that business trip. The laughter she came home with now felt like a cruel mockery, a taunt aimed right at my obliviousness. But if I was going to get answers, I needed a plan. Confronting her without evidence would just give her room to lie. And Allison, she's good at lying. Over the years, I'd seen her spin stories at work, charm her way out of tight spots, and convince people of things that weren't even remotely true. If I walked into a confrontation empty-handed, she'd run circles around me. So, I decided to dig deeper. First, I started with her phone. That night, while she was in the shower, I unlocked it again. I didn't have much time, so I focused on the messages with Jason. I took screenshots of everything, the flirty texts, the inside jokes, the last night was unforgettable message. I also checked her photo gallery, but most of the recent pictures were of work events, landscapes, and her meals, nothing incriminating. Then I stumbled upon her hidden album. My heart raced as I opened it. But to my surprise, there were no explicit photos or videos, just a few random pictures of her and some coworkers, including Jason. He looked about my age, maybe a few years younger, with that slick, confident smile that screamed trouble. There was one photo of the two of them at what looked like a bar. She was leaning into him, laughing, her hand resting on his shoulder. It wasn't definitive proof of anything, but it still felt like a punch to the gut. Next, I checked her email. Most of it was work-related, but buried among the dozens of project updates and meeting invites, I found a receipt for a hotel booking. 2 rooms, one under her name, the other under Jason's. It didn't take a genius to figure out what was going on. My stomach churned as I stared at the email. She'd gone out of her way to make it look professional, like they were just colleagues on a business trip. But I wasn't buying it. The final piece of the puzzle came from our shared credit card statement. While she was out networking on her trip, she'd charged a couple of expensive dinners, spa services, and even a bottle of champagne. I knew her company wouldn't cover all of that, which meant she'd either paid for it herself or someone else had shared the bill. By the time she came downstairs that evening, I was sitting at the kitchen table with a stack of evidence in front of me. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I smiled and asked, "How was your day?" She looked at me a little startled. "Good, what?" "Oh, no reason," I said, sipping my coffee. "Just wondering if you're ready for the weekend. I was thinking we could have a quiet night in tomorrow, maybe watch a movie or cook dinner together." Her expression softened. "That sounds nice," she said, leaning down to kiss me on the cheek. And just like that, the guilt I'd been carrying all day shifted. It wasn't guilt about snooping anymore. It was anger, pure, seething anger. She could kiss me, look me in the eye, and act like nothing was wrong, like she wasn't hiding anything. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, going over everything I'd found. I had the texts, the photos, the emails, the receipts. I had enough to confront her, but I still didn't have the full story. I needed to know exactly what had happened on that trip, and there was only one way to find out. I decided to hire a private investigator. The next morning, while Allison was at work, I made the call. The PI was a no-nonsense guy named Mark. He'd been doing this for years and didn't sugarcoat anything. After I explained the situation, he asked for copies of the evidence I'd gathered and said he'd start digging into Jason and Allison right away. "I'll need access to her schedule too," Mark said. "Any upcoming trips, meetings, anything out of the ordinary." Luckily, Allison's company was predictable. She had another business trip coming up in 2 weeks, and I told Mark about it. He assured me he'd have everything ready to tail her if she met up with Jason again. In the meantime, I had to keep playing my role. It wasn't easy. Every time Allison smiled at me, every time she kissed me goodnight, I wanted to scream. But I couldn't blow my cover. If she suspected anything, she'd just get better at hiding it. The waiting was excruciating. I spent every spare moment obsessing over the evidence, replaying our conversations in my head, analyzing every detail for signs I'd missed. And then one night, she slipped up. We were having dinner, and I casually asked about her upcoming trip. "Oh, it's just another project meeting," she said, twirling her fork in her pasta. "Same team as last time? Jason too?" I asked, keeping my tone light. Her fork froze mid-twirl. "What? Why do you ask?" "No reason," I said, shrugging. "You mentioned him before, just curious." She forced a laugh. "Yeah, he'll be there. He's on the team." I nodded, pretending not to notice the way her shoulders tensed. But inside, I felt a grim sense of satisfaction. She was nervous, and that meant I was getting closer to the truth. The days leading up to her next trip were torture. I felt like a man walking a tightrope, trying not to slip while the ground crumbled beneath me. Allison was her usual self, cheerful, affectionate, almost annoyingly normal. If I didn't know any better, I would have thought everything was fine. But every little thing she did set me on edge. The way she spent extra time getting ready in the mornings, how she always kept her phone within arm's reach, the random, hushed phone calls where she'd excuse herself to the other room. It was like she was daring me to confront her, testing just how far she could push before I snapped. I didn't snap, though. Instead, I channeled all that energy into working with Mark, the private investigator. He kept me updated on his progress, though most of it was routine stuff, background checks, social media digging, surveillance plans. He assured me we'd have everything we needed once the trip began. But then, 2 days before her departure, I stumbled across something that made my blood run cold. Allison left her laptop open on the dining table while she went to take a call. I wasn't planning to snoop, I really wasn't. But then I saw the email notification pop up. Subject: looking forward to another amazing night. Sender: Jason H. I froze, my heart pounding as I stared at the screen. My hands moved almost on their own as I clicked on the email. It was brief, but it said everything I needed to know. Can't wait to see you again. Last time was incredible. Let's make this trip even more unforgettable. I slammed the laptop shut just as Allison walked back in. She gave me a curious look but didn't say anything, and I mumbled some excuse about grabbing water before disappearing into the kitchen. My hands shook as I poured myself a glass, the email replaying in my mind. There it was, confirmation of her betrayal. And yet, I still didn't know the full extent of it. I needed to see it with my own eyes, hear it with my own ears. That night, as she packed for her trip, I stayed quiet. She hummed to herself, folding her clothes neatly into the suitcase, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I asked her casually what time her flight was, pretending to be interested in the logistics, and she answered without hesitation. She had no idea I was planning to follow her. The morning of her flight, I kissed her goodbye at the door, playing the part of the doting husband. Have a safe trip, I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside me. As soon as her car pulled out of the driveway, I sprang into action. Mark was already waiting near the airport, ready to tail her from the moment she arrived. I stayed behind for now, letting him do the heavy lifting while I monitored from a distance. Mark kept me updated with texts and photos. She checked in at the airport with Jason, the two of them sharing laughs and looking far too comfortable for just colleagues. They boarded the same flight, and Mark assured me he'd be waiting when they landed. By the time they arrived at the hotel, I had a sinking feeling in my gut. The photos Mark sent were damning. Allison and Jason walking side by side, her hand brushing against his arm as they entered the lobby. 2 rooms booked, Mark texted me, but they're only using one. That was it. The confirmation I'd been dreading. I booked the next flight out and met Mark near the hotel later that evening. We set up in a rented car across the street, watching as lights flickered on in their shared room. I felt like I was living someone else's life, a spectator in my own personal nightmare. At one point, Mark offered to go in and gather more evidence, but I stopped him. Not yet, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Let's see what else they do. And so we waited. Around midnight, I saw them leave the hotel, arm in arm, heading toward a nearby bar. Mark followed discreetly while I stayed behind, my mind racing with all the possible ways this could end. When Mark returned, he showed me the photos he'd taken, Allison and Jason laughing, drinking, sitting far too close for comfort. At one point, Jason leaned in and kissed her, and she didn't even hesitate. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't some innocent misunderstanding. She was fully invested in whatever this was, and it was tearing me apart. Mark looked at me, his expression cautious. What do you want to do now? I didn't have an answer, not yet. But I knew one thing for sure. Allison wasn't coming home to the life she left behind. When Allison returned to the hotel with Jason that night, I watched from the shadows, my chest tight with rage and heartbreak. Mark and I had followed them back from the bar, and now we were parked just outside, watching the silhouettes in their hotel window. Every fiber of my being screamed at me to burst in, to confront them, to demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I sat there, gripping the edge of the seat so hard my knuckles turned white. Mark handed me his camera, showing me the photos he'd captured throughout the evening. The evidence was undeniable. The laughter, the touches, the kiss. Every shot was another knife in my back. They're comfortable, Mark said quietly. This isn't new. They've done this before. I nodded, unable to speak. Deep down, I'd already known that. The way she laughed when she came home, the ease with which she lied to my face. It all made sense now. This wasn't a one-time thing. This was a pattern, a betrayal that had been going on for God knows how long. When the lights in their room finally went out, Mark turned to me. "You've got enough proof now," he said. "What's your next move?" I didn't answer right away. My mind was racing, torn between the desire to confront her and the need to think things through. Bursting in now would only give her an excuse to twist the narrative, to paint me as the bad guy. No, I needed to be smarter than that. "Let's head back," I said finally. "I need time to process this." Mark nodded, and we drove back to the motel where I was staying. The next morning, while Allison was still blissfully unaware of my presence in the same city, I sat down with Mark to review the evidence. We had photos, text messages, emails, and receipts. All of it pointed to the same conclusion. "I can keep digging if you want," Mark said. "But honestly, this is more than enough to confront her." I nodded, staring at the stack of evidence on the table. I don't know how to approach this," I admitted. "She's so good at spinning things, making me doubt myself. If I confront her without the right plan, she'll just turn it around on me." Mark leaned back in his chair, studying me. "Then don't give her the chance," he said. "Lay it all out at once. Hit her with the proof, and don't let her wiggle out of it. But more importantly, decide what you want to do after that." That was the question I'd been avoiding. What did I want? Part of me wanted to fight for our marriage, to believe that this could somehow be fixed. But another part of me, the part that felt raw and hollow, knew that the trust was gone. Even if she begged for forgiveness, even if she swore it would never happen again, how could I ever believe her? Still, I wasn't ready to make that decision yet, not until I heard the truth from her own lips. When Allison came home from her trip a few days later, she walked through the door with the same bright, carefree smile. "Hey, babe," she called out, dropping her suitcase by the door. "Miss me?" I stood in the living room, arms crossed, waiting. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady but cold. Her smile faltered for a split second before she quickly recovered. "Oh, what about?" "About your trip," I said, gesturing for her to sit. She hesitated, her eyes darting to her phone on the counter. I could see the wheels turning in her head, trying to figure out if I knew anything. Finally, she sat down, folding her hands in her lap like a child caught sneaking cookies. "What about it?" she asked, feigning innocence. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I pulled out the folder I had prepared with all the evidence, photos, screenshots, receipts, and placed it on the coffee table between us. Her eyes widened as she looked at the folder, and for the first time, she seemed genuinely nervous. "What's this?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Go ahead," I said. "Take a look." She opened the folder with trembling hands, flipping through the pages. As she scanned the evidence, her face turned pale. "Care to explain?" I asked, my tone calm but laced with anger. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Finally, she managed to stammer. This isn't what it looks like." I laughed bitterly. "Isn't it? Because it looks like you've been cheating on me with Jason for months. It looks like every business trip you've taken has been an excuse to spend time with him. And it looks like you've been lying to my face this whole time." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let her play the victim. "Don't you dare cry," I snapped. "You don't get to cry, not after everything you've done." She looked down at her hands, silent. "Why, Allison?" I demanded. "Why did you do it? Was I not enough for you?" She finally looked up at me, and what she said next sent a chill down my spine. "You wouldn't understand," she whispered. I stared at her, stunned. "Try me," I said. She took a deep breath, wiping her tears. "Jason makes me feel alive," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. It's not about you. It's about me. I needed something more, something exciting, and Jason gave me that." Her words hit me like a freight train. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a lapse in judgment. This was a choice, a deliberate, selfish choice to betray me for her own gratification. I stood up, my hands trembling with anger. "We're done, Allison," I said, my voice cold and final. "Pack your things and get out. I want you gone by the end of the day." She looked up at me, her face a mix of shock and defiance. "You don't mean that." "Oh, I mean it," I said. "And if you're not gone by tonight, I'll make sure Jason knows exactly what kind of person he's getting involved with." Allison didn't leave that night, of course. True to form, she made everything as difficult as possible, dragging out the confrontation and refusing to take any responsibility. She spent hours alternating between crying, shouting, and accusing me of overreacting. It was almost impressive, the way she could flip from victim to aggressor in a split second. "You're seriously going to throw away 12 years of marriage over this?" she screamed at one point, her face red with anger. "No, Allison," I replied coldly. "You threw it away the moment you decided to sneak around with Jason. Don't pin this on me." But she wasn't hearing it. She never really did. She started throwing out every excuse in the book. How she'd been feeling neglected, how Jason had been there for her, how I wasn't the same man I used to be. Each word felt like another slap in the face. Eventually, I had to walk away. I couldn't stand to be in the same room with her anymore. I locked myself in the guest room, needing space to breathe and think. Meanwhile, I could hear her pacing the hallway, calling someone on her phone. Probably Jason, I thought bitterly. The next morning, I woke up to find her still in the house. She was in the kitchen, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. "You're still here," I said flatly. She looked up at me, her expression calm, too calm. "I'm not leaving," she said simply. I blinked, taken aback by her audacity. "Excuse me." "You heard me," she said, crossing her arms. "This is my home too. I'm not going anywhere." I stared at her, anger bubbling up inside me. "After everything you've done, you think you can just stay here like nothing happened?" She shrugged. "I don't see why not. You don't have the right to kick me out. Legally, this is my house too." I clenched my fists, trying to keep my temper in check. She was right, of course. Legally, I couldn't force her to leave, not without a court order, and she knew it. But I wasn't about to let her win. For the next week, Allison and I lived in a tense, suffocating stalemate. She stayed in the master bedroom while I moved my things into the guest room. We barely spoke, and when we did, it was usually a fight. Every interaction was filled with venom, resentment, and the kind of bitterness that comes from knowing you've been betrayed by someone you once loved. Meanwhile, I was working behind the scenes to set things in motion. I'd already contacted a divorce attorney, who assured me that we could push for a favorable settlement given the mountain of evidence I had against her. I also started making arrangements to separate our finances, canceling joint accounts, and securing my own savings. But the final nail in the coffin came when I got a call from Mark, the private investigator. "I've got something you'll want to see," he said. We met later that day, and Mark handed me a USB drive. "Surveillance footage," he explained, "from the hotel during their last trip. Let's just say it's pretty damning." I plugged the drive into my laptop that night, and what I saw confirmed everything I already knew. The footage showed Allison and Jason entering their hotel room together, laughing and holding hands. A few hours later, they emerged again, looking disheveled but happy. It was all there, plain as day. The next morning, I confronted Allison one last time. "This ends now," I said, tossing the USB drive onto the table. "I've got everything I need to file for divorce. You can either leave willingly, or I'll make sure this gets shared with everyone you know, including your boss." Her face went pale as she stared at the drive. For a moment, I thought she might try to argue, but then she slumped into a chair, defeated. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "No, Allison," I said, my tone firm. "You didn't have to do this, but you did. And now you're going to face the consequences." That afternoon, she packed her things and left. I didn't watch her go. I didn't want to see her face ever again. As I stood alone in the empty house, I felt a strange mix of emotions: relief, anger, sadness. It was all there, swirling inside me. But above all, I felt a sense of closure. This chapter of my life was over, and as painful as it had been, I knew it was the right decision. After Allison walked out of the house that afternoon, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The silence in the house was deafening at first, but it was also strangely comforting. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't have to play detective, second-guess my every move, or wonder what kind of lies she was feeding me. The divorce process wasn't easy. It rarely is. Allison tried to fight me on everything, from the house to the finances. She even tried to claim that her affair wasn't serious enough to justify losing what she believed she was entitled to. But thanks to the evidence I'd gathered, my lawyer made quick work of her arguments. In the end, the settlement was fair, though not exactly satisfying. I kept the house, my savings, and my dignity. She got a portion of our joint assets, but honestly, I was just glad to be rid of her. As the weeks turned into months, I focused on rebuilding my life. I took up new hobbies, reconnected with old friends, and even started therapy to process everything I'd been through. It wasn't easy. There were days when the anger and sadness threatened to overwhelm me, but I kept pushing forward. One day, while cleaning out the house, I found an old photo of Allison and me from our honeymoon. We looked so happy, so full of hope for the future. I stared at it for a long time before finally throwing it away. That chapter of my life was over, and it was time to let it go. As for Allison, I heard through mutual acquaintances that things didn't work out with Jason. Apparently, their exciting romance fizzled out once the reality of their actions set in. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly, I just felt sorry for her. She'd thrown away everything for a fleeting thrill, and now she was left with nothing. These days, I've learned to laugh again. Not the forced, hollow laugh that Allison brought into my life, but a real, genuine laugh that comes from a place of peace. I'm still healing, still figuring out who I am outside of that marriage, but I'm getting there. And as I sit here typing this, I realize that sharing my story has been part of that healing process. If you've made it this far, thank you for reading. Life doesn't always go the way we expect, but sometimes losing something can make room for something better. Here's to new beginnings.